G'day, how you doing? Adam Williams here from Easy Way Photography. Apologies, I'm just out of shot here capturing this beautiful seascape, sea stack at Mimosa Rocks National Park, right down the southern end of Mimosa Rocks National Park. I'll show you what I'm looking at by hitting video on my camera here. Okay, so that's the composition that I'm looking at here. The lens I've got on here is a beautifully wide Samyang 14mm 2.4. It's absolutely gorgeous, relatively new. Look at this light coming through right now, absolutely superb. So what I'm going to do is I'll just turn off the video for a second on the main camera here and switch over to capturing stills again. Okay, so we're back on that. Now I don't have any neutral density filters for this really super wide lens yet. So what I've been doing is I've got the camera wound right out to f22, and then I'm just firing off. When the water comes up, I just fire off a burst of shots and I can blend that burst together because I'm only getting, what am I shooting at? 1/5 of a second. So rather slow, but not really slow enough to get the silkiness that I really want from the water here. So what I'll do is I'll wait for one of these waves to come up. Here comes one now. Absolutely beautiful, wrapping around that rock, and I'll just fire off a burst now like this. Okay, now I'll be able to blend all of those shots together in Photoshop and create a type of long exposure. It essentially will be exactly the same as a long exposure. I'm not sure how many shots I got in there, maybe 15 or so. So 15 times 1/5 of a second, I think that's 5 shots for every second. So if there's 15, we get a 3-second exposure, something like that. Now what I can do now is wait for another big wave and do the same thing again, and I can double up that exposure length. There we go, a few more out of that section there. Absolutely gorgeous light. It's about an hour after sunrise, and we've got this overcast sky, and every now and then the sun bursts through a pocket or a hole in the clouds and just throws this beautiful golden light across this scene, which is absolutely spectacular. Okay, so here we are back in Lightroom, and what I want to show you now, or give you a demonstration on, is how you can blend multiple images together to give you a long exposure without the use of neutral density filters. Now, look, this is a great technique to get you out of a hole or get you out of potentially not when you don't have a set of filters for a particular lens, which I don't here. I've got this beautiful 14mm Samyang, and it's one of those wider lenses with the bulbous front on it, and I've only got the 100mm Nissi filter set, so they don't fit on this particular 14mm Samyang lens. I would need the 150mm neutral density set from Nissi to fit this particular lens. So in this case, what I've done, and as I explained in the earlier video, is I've captured multiple images from the same location off the same tripod, and I'm going to show you here how you can blend them together and get a long exposure effect without the use of neutral density filters, which is awesome. Okay, so what you can see here is I've got a series of images. I ended up capturing, I'm not sure, maybe 50, 60 images. I won't blend all of them. I have already gone through and blended an image using 35 individual images, and I'll show you that later. But for this demonstration, I'm just going to use these ones with a star on down through here. I think I've got 8. So we're going to use those. I'll show you how that works, and then I'll show you the one I prepared earlier to give you an example of the effect you can achieve. Now, this is not a perfect solution. Look, if the tripod moves, they're probably not going to blend together very well at all. So if possible, I would always recommend using filters just for the fact that they're heaps easier. And look, if you don't have a big powerful computer, this process might freeze up your computer as well. But give it a shot with just a few images, 4, 5 or 6, and then try 10, try 20, as I said, try 30, see how you go. Alright, so let's take a look at this technique. So I've got these ones marked with a star. What I'm going to do is just apply a fairly general Lightroom workflow to these images. So I'm going to drop my highlights down, something that I normally do. I won't need to touch the shadows. You can see there is no real deep dark shadows in this particular image. So we'll move on down. I don't need that open. We'll open up the detail and just do a little bit of a default sharpening here. We'll also do pretty much a default noise reduction, which I like to do 30 on the luminance slider, 100 on the detail slider, roughly 30 on the color, and 100 on the detail color slider as well. Lens corrections, I would normally tick those too. Remove chromatic aberration and enable profile correction. You can see this particular Samyang is not recognized by Lightroom. I'm not going to bother going and looking it up because it doesn't matter for this particular image or this particular technique. So in fact, I can just turn off profile corrections for this one. Don't need to transform. That's all we need to do. What I'm now going to do is hold the shift key down and click on the last image of the series. That highlights them all. I can click on this synchronize button, click on check all, click on synchronize, and that will sync all of those settings together, so every single one of those images has the same settings or the same workflow that I just applied to that first image. Now that's done, I'm just going to right click on screen here and select edit in and scroll down to open as layers in Photoshop. That'll take a second and then we'll jump over to Photoshop and I'll show you the rest of the technique over there. Okay, so here we are in Photoshop and you can see Lightroom has loaded up all of these layers. What have we got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 I think. Okay, 8 or 9 there anyway. And you can see they're all of a sequence. Okay, so if you're only doing 8 or 9 using this technique, you would want them all from the one sequence if possible. Here's the one I prepared earlier. This is a 35 individual image stack in Photoshop using the technique that I'm about to show you. And look at that beautiful long exposure that we have there. Okay, that's exactly what we're looking for. We can't achieve that in camera because I don't have the neutral density filters. I would recommend that that would be the easier way to do this because this took roughly about probably 40 minutes of processing time to get them all over to Photoshop and then stacked together using this technique. Okay, but you can see it looks absolutely beautiful. So let's take a look at this technique. Now, if your tripod has stayed absolutely stable, then you probably don't need to auto align the images, but I'll show you that little technique anyway. We want to click on the top layer there like so. Just click on the top so it's highlighted. Hold down shift, click on the bottom. You can now see all those layers are highlighted. Move over to the edit menu, down to auto align. Click on that, make sure auto is selected and click OK. And this is going to take another probably 2 or 3 minutes, I suppose. So you can see it's quite a time consuming process purely on processing power. It takes a long time to process this technique. Okay, so what that will do is just Photoshop will look at the pixels of the image and auto align them. If your tripod has moved a fraction, it will try and align them, but it's still, if your tripod has moved, chances are you won't get the absolute perfect result. It's best if your tripod is on a perfectly stable foundation like these solid rocks here and a good solid tripod, and you'll get the perfect result. So let's move along. Okay, once again we need to select all of those images. We move up to the filter menu and convert for smart filters. Once again, that's okay, click OK on this menu. Once again, this is going to take another 4 or 5 minutes using just the 9 images to process, and using the 35, this step took around about 20 odd minutes I think. Okay, so here we go. That's taken a good 3 or 4 minutes to do that. You can see all of those layers have now been stacked into one smart object here. Okay, so this particular layer now contains the information of all of those layers, but now we need to change the stack mode to get that long exposure technique, that long exposure feeling to the image. And the way we do that, we move up to the layer menu, down to smart objects, roughly in the middle there, across and down to stack mode, across and down to mean. Okay, and that'll give us the average of each of those images stacked together. Again, it's going to take a couple of minutes. Okay, and as you can see, look at this beautiful long exposure we've now got. I actually prefer this even more so than the 35 image stack that we've got here, because we've got all these beautiful wave lines and textures and movement in the water. Let's zoom in. Okay, look at that. Absolutely gorgeous. Because the tripod remained in the one spot, you can see the rocks are still perfectly sharp. Absolutely gorgeous there. Look at all that beautiful long exposure that we've created there. So we've probably created roughly between 1 and 2 second long exposure by stacking those 9 images together. Okay, they were all around about 1/5 or 1/8 of a second, I believe. So somewhere between 1 and 2 seconds is the exposure that we've created here, or the look we've created. And I don't know about you, but this is the raw file. Once we add a little bit of contrast and a little bit of pop to this, like if we just add even just an auto curves here, let's have a quick look. Okay, that will do. You can see what an absolutely gorgeous image this is going to be when we spend another 5 or so minutes just refining and processing this image. So as you can see, we can create the long exposure effect, the effect that we couldn't capture in camera because I didn't have the filters that suited this ultra-wide Samyang 14mm lens. Absolutely beautiful lens, by the way. I didn't have the filters to suit that. However, what we've managed to do is create the same long exposure effect by capturing multiple images and then blending them using this technique in Photoshop. So there you go. There's a slightly shorter long exposure, if you like, of 9 images stacked together. And here we go here with the much longer, much softer 35 image stack. So have a play with that. Hope you enjoyed that tutorial. Thanks again for watching along, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.